know if I'll be in this room or some other room. I really don't know. But it's going to be, in my opinion, a great study. I'm looking forward to doing it with somebody, with you or whoever. And I'm going to announce that in the coming weeks. Not ready yet to announce the title of it, but it's something that I've been looking forward to. Meanwhile, I want to say welcome. We want to say welcome to everybody. We have those in the auditorium. We say welcome to you. Also, we have those watching online, and we say welcome to you. Now, to get everything on the feed for Facebook and YouTube, if you have a question or comment, just text me, and I will be glad to do that. They're going to give me a signal when it's 5 minutes before class ends, and I'll check my messages at that time, and I'll spend that last 5 minutes on your questions. Now, we're going to remind folks that if you're watching online, if you want to get all of these study guides, there are already 17, there's more to come, just email me at that email address right there, and I'd be glad to try to take care of that need for you. As I've already announced, we're up to story number 153 of the final week. It's on Thursday, our Thursday. It's a very eventful day. We're going to have the preparation for the Passover meal, okay? And also in conjunction with that Passover meal, we're going to have the disciples squabbling. Can you believe that? They're going to squabble. They're going to have a disagreement. Their disagreement is over who is the greatest. This is all happening on their way to Jerusalem. They either spent the night in Bethany or they spent the night on the Mount of Olives. We're not for sure where they spent the night. But on their way to Jerusalem, this would be our Thursday afternoon and our Thursday evening. Keep in mind, our Thursday evening would be their Friday, okay? Their evening begins their new day. Let's look at Luke chapter 22. Luke chapter 22, verse number 7. Then came the day of unleavened bread, when the Passover must be killed. Stop right there. We have already mentioned this, but I think we need to mention it again. We have a controversy. In fact, there are really two big controversies regarding the final week. Controversy number one, the difference in the Passover according to John as compared to Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Okay? The other controversy is in the time on the cross, because it looks like in John it's happening at a different time than it's happening in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. I believe there is no controversy at all. I believe there is a ready solution. But to illustrate our problem, go with me to John 18 for just a moment. Now, we're going to come back to it, but go with me to John 18. John 18. Notice what it says in verse 28. Then they led Jesus from Caiaphas, once again, however you prefer, to the praetorium. This is where Pilate is. And it was early morning. But they themselves did not go into the praetorium. And we think the praetorium, in this case, is Herod the Great's old palace. Remember, as we said already, the praetorium is wherever the Roman leader is. If it's a tent, if it's a shack, or if it's a palace, wherever he is residing, that is the praetorium. But they, the Jewish leaders, themselves did not go into the praetorium, lest they should be defiled, but they might eat the what? Passover. This is after this event. Matthew, Mark, and Luke clearly says that Jesus had the Passover with his disciples. But here we have John saying that the Jewish leaders would not go into the praetorium because they want to defile themselves so they could eat the Passover. Go over to chapter 19. Chapter 19, verse 14. Now it was the preparation day of the Passover. Once again, John is saying the Passover has not happened yet. Well, what's going on here? Okay? I think, already stated, there is a solution to this. Now, what do the Bible scholars say? Well, some Bible scholars say, well, John made a mistake. My answer to that is N-O, 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 and a double N-O. John did not make a mistake. If the Bible was human, of human origin, yeah, I would agree. But the Bible is divinely inspired. So it's not human mistake. John did not make a mistake, and Matthew, Mark, and Luke did not make a mistake. And remember, Jesus himself said, "It was my desire to eat the Passover with you." Well, what other solutions do the Bible scholars give us? Well, they say, well, it's because this Passover that John is writing about, this Passover is a special meal of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Well, there are some special meals, primarily one special meal of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And yes, Passover happened here, and the Feast of Unleavened Bread happens here. They go together. Passover happens first, and the Feast of Unleavened Bread happens next. Trouble with that explanation. John does not use the word for that meal. He uses the word Paschal, which is Passover, in both John 18 and John 19. John knew what he was talking about. If John wanted to refer to that meal, the Shamgal, during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, he would have called it that. But he calls this Passover. What other solutions do we have? To me, the best solution is the difference in calendars. The difference in calendars that started with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and it finally gravitated a difference between the Jerusalem Jews and the Galilean Jews. Now, yes, there are some scholars who will say, well, this is John using the Essene calendar, and the Essene calendar was a solar calendar as compared to the Jewish lunar calendar. But I reject that because, John is writing, he's writing about probably 15 to 20 years after the Essenes existed. And keep in mind, the Essenes are not even mentioned in the New Testament. We only know of the Essenes through writings other than the New Testament. I believe it is a difference between the Jerusalem Jews, represented by the Sadducees, and the Galilean Jews, which would be represented by the Pharisees. And there seems to be a difference of one day. So there was a Passover that the Galilean Jews observed, and the next day would be the Passover that the Jerusalem Jews, primarily the Sadducee-led Jews, would observe. I think that explains it. Jesus, having probably 11 of the 12 apostles being Galileans, we think only Judas was the non-Galilean. He observes Passover with the other Galileans, and then the very next day would be the feast of Passover for the Sadducee-led Jews. So I think that explains the difference. To me, there's no controversy between John and the synoptic writers. I believe they are on the same page together. So why would John do this? Why would John do this? Because he is trying to give other details that are not necessarily in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Keep in mind, John could already read Matthew, Mark, and Luke. We think Matthew, Mark, and Luke was finished way before John even started the book of John. John comes late. He is the last of the four gospel writers. So why should John just rehash the same information? He gives us, John is very unique. The book of John is so different from Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Because Matthew, Mark, and Luke basically a few differences, but most of it the same. John is different. John gives us other information that we need to know. So to me, no controversy. When we get to Jesus on the cross, I think we'll be able to explain that controversy. And once again, there's no real controversy. Let's continue. Go back to the book of Luke. Then came the day of unleavened bread when the Passover must be killed. Remember, it's killed on Nisan 14. It is then observed or eaten at the beginning of the 15th day of the calendar. And Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, go and prepare the Passover. What? Go and prepare the Passover. Even Jesus called it the Passover for us, that we may eat. So he said to them, where do you want us to prepare? You're supposed to be either inside the city walls of Jerusalem, or there was some designated areas outside the gate, outside the wall. But you had to be in that area. You could not, by their custom, you could not observe Passover, say, if you're in the Galilee. You couldn't observe it. You're supposed to be either inside the city walls of Jerusalem or in designated areas that surrounded, you might call it the suburbs of Jerusalem. He said to them, behold, when you have entered the city. Now remember, the Jewish leaders are watching for Jesus now. When you enter the city, a man will meet you carrying a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house which he enters. Then you shall say to the master of the house, the teacher, notice how Jesus described himself, the teacher. The teacher says to you, where is the guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? Then he will show you a large furnished upper room. There make ready. So they went and found it just as he said to them. Are you surprised that they found it just like Jesus described? No. Jesus knows what he's doing. Jesus is in control. Jesus is never out of control during the final week. You know, the Jewish leadership, they thought they were in control. Pilate thought he was in control. Herod thought Herod Agrippa, the first there, he thought he was in control. Or Herod Antipas thought he was in control. But none of them were in control. Jesus is in control. And they prepared the Passover. John chapter 1, verse 29. John chapter 1, verse 29. How did John the Baptist describe Jesus? Behold the Lamb of God. Behold the Lamb of God. Jesus is going to be that perfect lamb that will die for all of our sins. Now, note, they're supposed to notice a man with a water jar. Ladies, get ready to throw rotten tomatoes at me. That's woman's work. That is, in the first century, that's woman's work. A man would not be carrying a water jar because that's woman's work. So that would be a little different. Out of all the people carrying water, and remember, they carried water. You don't have, Herod had somewhat indoor plumbing, but 99% of the people did not have indoor plumbing, okay? You had to carry in your water. And to have a man carrying a water jar, that's going to be noteworthy. They're going to say, okay, that's the guy right there. See him? Okay? Because it's going to be all women and one man. Where's the location? Where's the location? Hold on, back up here. Where's the location? We don't know. It had to be a large house because we're going to have a lot of people in this guest room. We're going to have 12 disciples and Jesus. Some people say, well, it could have been John Mark's family's home, because we know that the early church often met in that house. Acts chapter 12, verse 12. Remember when James died and Peter is arrested and they're praying for Peter's release? Where are they praying? They're praying in John Mark's family's home. That's the guy. John Mark is the guy who wrote the book of John. But keep in mind, we do not know. It's a guess. It's strictly a guess. The room was already prepared. What does that tell me? Jesus had already made arrangements. Jesus, once again, is taking care of his disciples. We're now just hours away from the cross. And what is Jesus doing? Taking care of his disciples. Now, what was the meal like? It's not that. It's not that. That painting, the original is? Okay. The original of this is in Milan, this painting, done by a very famous Italian painter. He painted it like a European. He painted it like a European. Notice here, we have all of the disciples, including Jesus, looking European. Did they look that way? No. Very unlikely. Men raised in the Middle East do not look that way. Okay? Number two, notice the table. Notice the table. And they're sitting at this table. No. That's not the way you did a Passover meal in Jerusalem. That would not be correct. Also, the painter, who is Da Vinci, he also liked to create a little controversy. Right there. Controversy. Because that's a very ladylike looking disciple there. Okay? There were no ladies in the room that we know of. It was just the 12 apostles and Jesus. Just them. Okay? Now, I think Da Vinci said that was supposed to be John. Is that right? I think he said that was supposed to be John. But once again, look right there. That's something that's very ladylike, I would say. Now, so if this is not the way the Passover meal was handled, how was the Passover meal handled? Exactly like this. This would be a traditional Jewish Passover table. Notice it's very low to the ground, okay? About 6 to 8 inches off the floor. Notice also the cushions all around the table, okay? You have 2 honored positions at the Passover meal. It's to the right and to the left of the host. Who's the host at this Passover meal? It's Jesus. Jesus is the host. So, who is to the right and to the left? Well, we know who's to the right. It's John. It's that disciple whom Jesus loved, because Peter says, hey, John, hey, ask him who it is. Who's going to betray him? You know, ask him. So he's leaning on the chest of Jesus. So he's to, you remember, sorry, left-handed people, the honored hand is the right hand. You eat with your right hand. You're leaning on your left hand, left arm. So John is the guy on Jesus' right. Who's on Jesus' left? Judas. Because he's close enough. Now, look at this. He's close enough to hand Judas a morsel of bread. You can't do that unless you're laying next to him. Now, exactly where was the honored positions? There's 2 setups. Usually we count the honored position of host to be right here, and then your 2 honored other positions are here and here. At the bottom, this is kind of like a U shape. At the bottom of the U, there was some Jewish people, mainly the Sadduceans, okay, that said, no, we got to be different. We're going to make the honor position right here, and the 2 other honor positions are here and here. But that's the Sadducees, okay? And Jesus has got a bunch of Galileans, so more likely he's doing the Galilean way. So the honor positions are right here and here. This was the setup for the Passover meal. This is going to be where Jesus will institute his Lord's Supper. Now, Jesus is somewhere in the city. We don't know. The traditional location is here. That's just tradition. There's not a lot of strong evidence that says it's right there. They will end up going out here to the Garden of Gethsemane, and that's where Jesus will be arrested. Now, during this meal, we're going to have some things happen here, and we're going to read them in just a moment. We're going to have Jesus washing the feet of the disciples. Very, very important. We're going to have that Passover meal. Now remember, we did a couple of months ago, we did a lesson on the Passover as we did our series on Mark, and we actually went through how it was handled, how each part of the meal was handled. Remember, it's composed of a roasted lamb, the bitter herbs, the unleavened bread, the dipping sauce, etc. There's a few of the things thrown in there. The meal featured 4 cups. Remember in that sermon we talked about where our cup that we observe, where it comes from. Each of the 4 cups is separated by the singing of a psalm. Okay, and we find those psalms, that'd be chapter 113 through chapter 118. After the second cup, the youngest, who's the youngest in the room? John. John is probably the youngest in the room. He would be required to ask the host the meaning of Passover. And that's where Jesus would once again tell them the meaning of the Passover meal. Now, we also have during this meal, we've got a disagreement by the apostles. Let's look at that disagreement. This disagreement is a disagreement about who's the greatest. Who's the greatest? It's not a new disagreement. Matthew chapter 18, verse 1. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Who's going to be your right-hand men? Who's going to be you're going to be the general? We want to know who's going to be your captains." Then Jesus called a little child to him, set him in the midst of them, and said, "Surely I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven." Matthew chapter 20. Matthew chapter 20, verse number 17. Now Jesus, going up to Jerusalem, took the 12 disciples aside on the road and said to them, "Behold, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed by the chief priests." And what happens in verse 20? The mother of Zebedee's sons, that's James and John, they came to him with her sons, kneeling down and asking something from him. "What do you wish? Grant that these two sons of mine may sit, one on your right hand and the other on your left, in your kingdom." I want my sons to be the greatest. Give them the role of captain. The other guys can be just lieutenants. Let my two sons be captain. Now, look at the disagreement in Luke 22. Luke 22, verse 24. There also arose a dispute among them as to which of them should be considered the greatest. They're squabbling over who is the greatest. Jesus loved visual lessons. Jesus was the master at sharing those visual lessons. What does he do? He gets up, takes off the outer garment, wraps around a towel, gets water, and he starts going around. Remember, we've got what? Go back here. We've got all these dirty feet sticking out from the table. And everybody's dirty feet is pretty close to the other guy's nostril. Okay? You got a lot of dirty feet pretty close to a nostril, just a few feet away. Jesus goes behind them and starts washing their feet. What's the lowest job you can think of? I have a friend who works for the sanitation department in his city. He's worked for that sanitation department for a long time. I admire him for that because he takes a lot of kidding. Because people say the job of a garbage collector is the lowest job. Now, he doesn't believe that. He believes he is performing a service for his community, and he does a great job at that service. But still, you know how people are. They make fun of garbage collectors. So in our society, maybe our society would say garbage collector is the lowest job. Well, in their society, washing someone's feet was one of the lowest jobs. That was the job of the lowest servant. You know, the new servant who has no, history with you. He's just started with you. He's the lowest guy on the totem pole. You give him that job. It was supposedly a custom that you always have someone there to do that job. Remember Simon the Pharisee? And remember when the woman came in and anointed the feet of Jesus, and Simon is critical of that occasion? Jesus pointed out, "You didn't provide someone to wash my feet. This woman has washed my feet." You didn't provide someone to anoint me, to give you a little perfume. They often would do that. They would have a little perfume to give. Simon, you didn't do that. It was the job of the lowest servant to do that. So what's Jesus doing? He's taken the role of the lowest servant. The great teacher, not just the rabbi, but as Mary Magdalene later called him, Rabboni, which is even a higher title for a teacher, is doing the lowest job. What is the lesson for those disciples? Serve. Serve. Jesus goes around and washes their feet. Now, Peter, Peter had hoof and mouth disease. Well, actually, he had foot and mouth disease because he often opened his mouth when he should have kept it shut. Because Peter, what does Peter do here? Look at John 13, verse 6. He came to Simon Peter, and Peter said to him, Lord, are you washing my feet? Jesus answered and said, what am I doing? You do not understand now, but you will know after this. You're going to understand down the road. Right now, you don't really get it. Peter said to him, you shall never wash my feet. I can picture Peter kind of maybe pulling his feet away from Jesus, kind of moving his feet away from Jesus. Jesus answered, if I do not wash you, you have no part with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Jesus is trying to show to them there's no big I and little you. There's no big I and little you. Everybody is important. Everybody is important. You think for just a moment here. Think for just a moment of all the little things that happen that you probably take for granted. I know sometimes I take for granted. The men and women that get the communion ready for us. I have been at a congregation that on a Sunday morning, when the guys went to, serve communion, there was nothing in the cups. Uh-oh. That's a little job, but it's an important job. The sound and video team, they're back there behind a glass window. You don't think too much about them. But what if we don't have the proper sound on? What if we don't have the PowerPoint running? The lesson is not as good. Everybody is important. Everybody is important. How about the people who clean? We don't think about that, do we? Okay, let's face it, we're kind of messy people. We take our often we leave our trash on the pews. Now, yeah, we do that, don't we? We leave paper and trash and maybe whatever on the pews. We don't think anything about that. Someone's got to clean that up. What would happen if we came in here and all that stuff was just piling up? Everybody is important. Jesus washed their feet to demonstrate to them, why are you squabbling about greatness? You're a team. Act like a team. I'm going to pull a name out that you probably will not know. Nate Archibald. Now, if you're into basketball, you might recognize that name. Tom is shaking his head. He remembers that name. Nate Archibald was called Tiny Archibald. Why was he called Tiny? Because he was short. In the field of basketball in the NBA, he was very, very short. He was an all-star. He was an all-star. Okay, we got 5 minutes. I'm going to check the text in just a moment. He was an all-star. Was he ever the team leader in scoring? No. Was he ever the team leader in rebounds? No. For a season? No. No, he wasn't. For a season, never led the team in scoring for a season, never led them in rebounds for a season. But what was he? He was the guy that made everybody else look good. Because he was one of the NBA's greatest assist leaders. He won many assist championships because he made everybody else look good. What's an assist in basketball? It's helping the other guy score a point. And he helped the other guys on his team score a point. Jesus is saying, be a tiny Archibald. Be someone that's part of the team, making everybody else function better. Because the glory, Matthew 5:16, the glory goes to God, not ourselves. Final point before I check here, and we don't have any, I don't have any questions. Don't have any questions. So I got 3 minutes to wrap up here. I want you to think about this. Jesus is still after the heart of Judas. Why do I say that? I would conclude that Jesus washed the feet of Judas. If he washed the other 11's feet, I think he washed Judas' feet also. Hey, I'm washing the guy who's going to betray me? Yeah. Why does he do that? And why does he give him one of the honored 2 spots? Now he has John, because he's going to ask the question, what is the meaning of this night? He's the youngest. He's got John here. He's got Judas here. Another honored spot. Where's Peter and James? They're Peter, James, and John. And they're the 3 super early apostles. At least we call them that sometimes because they're always the inner 3. Well, we don't know where Peter and James is. We don't know exactly where they're seated. But they're not in the spot here next to Jesus. It's Judas. Judas was not a robot. He allowed Satan to control his life. And in so doing, he became the betrayer. But Jesus is just a little bit of encouragement here. Judas, I still love you. In fact, it says he loved his disciples to the end. It doesn't say he loved everybody except Judas. Notice that? It doesn't say Jesus loved everybody except Judas. Judas as much love as any of the other 11 disciples. Judas made the decision. He made a decision to turn his back on his Lord and listen to Satan. And in so doing, he became the betrayer of our Lord. We will resume, Lord willing, come Wednesday night. We'll be looking at the Lord's Supper instituted. Okay, that's happening probably sometime around 8 o'clock or maybe a little bit later. We're going to be also looking at the predictions of Judas' betrayal and Peter's denial. And then we're going to have that famous farewell discourse to the disciples that actually covers 4 chapters. Chapters 14, 15, 16, then chapter 17 is a prayer from Jesus. Okay? We're leading up to the garden, and in the garden, that's where Judas will betray him. And then we'll have story number 154. Once again, if you don't have these lessons, come up here and grab them, and you are dismissed. Thank you so much. Okay, you're going to get on the road, right? You're leaving.